It's impossible to defend Cowboys coach Jason Garrett today. He cost his team a football game last night. On Dak Prescott's best night as a football player, Garrett took the game out of his quarterback's hands when it mattered the most. We all saw it. Dallas trailed the Vikings 28-24 in the final 2 minutes. Dak's passing drove the Cowboys to the Minnesota 11-yard line. Dallas then ran Ezekiel Elliott on consecutive plays and threw the ball to him on a third. The 3 plays netted -3 yards. The Cowboys lost, dropping into a first-place tie with the Eagles atop the NFC East at 5-4. The team Jerry Jones thinks is a Super Bowl contender might not make the playoffs. Jason Garrett is to blame. That's obvious. What motivated Garrett's strategy isn't quite as obvious. You might think at the end of the game Garrett chose Zeke over Dak, or that Garrett chose his offensive line over Dak. Neither is true. Garrett took the ball away from Dak because he doesn't trust the Dallas defense. Garrett ran Zeke because the Cowboys wanted to milk the clock and make sure Kirk Cousins didn't have enough time to lead the Vikings on a game-winning touchdown drive. Given Cousins' reputation in big games and big moments, it's easy to argue the stupidity of Garrett's logic and strategy. But given the behavior of Garrett's boss, Jerry Jones, it's much easier to see why Garrett thinks the way that he does. Remember a couple of weeks ago at the trade deadline when Jones and the Cowboys made a big public display of their pursuit of Jet safety Jamal Adams? The Cowboys' official Twitter page made mention of their failed attempt to land Adams. That was Jerry Jones stating on the record that his team wasn't good enough on the defensive side of the ball. Let me be clear, I don't have a problem with the Cowboys trying to trade for Adams. My problem was the public admission of the attempt. You don't do that. It sends too loud of a message within the organization that you don't think your solutions are internal. Jason Garrett certainly heard the message, and standing on the sideline trailing by 4 points last night, Garrett tried to please his boss by protecting the defense Jerry doesn't think is good enough. I'm sure Jerry Jones is furious. What Garrett did was stupid. It was as dumb as tweeting, "The Dallas Cowboys had interest but couldn't land Jamal Adams," from the verified Cowboys Twitter feed. I went to bed last night convinced Jason Garrett had to be fired. I still believe that. Dak Prescott was on absolute fire last night. He threw for 397 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Vikings shut down Zeke and the Cowboys running game all night. You had to let Dak finish Minnesota and then roll the dice with your defense. But what choice would I make if ownership told me 2 weeks ago my defense wasn't good enough? Maybe I would have been as dumb as Jason Garrett. All right, joining the desk now are Fox Sports NFL analyst LeVar Arrington and Hall of Famer Tony Gonzalez. Marcel,
damn, that feel, man, we need to go back to the crib. Hall of Famer.
Man.
Congrats.
Any way to justify Garrett's late game decision making?
Absolutely, there's a way to justify it. It's amazing. One, let me just give you something to preface this conversation in terms of how we're interpreting the Dallas Cowboys. In praise, it's Kellen Moore. Oh, man, this offensive guru who was in the same quarterback room with Dak Prescott, speaking the unspoken language because of their chemistry when they were running off those wins early in the season. But in failure, it's Jason Garrett. And, oh, how could you take the ball out of Dak's hand? Who is third fiddle when it comes to the pecking order of how this team is designed? Let's not forget, the engine of this team was supposed to be Ezekiel Elliott. And then we saw a blossoming defense. And then Dak Prescott was supposed to just manage the situation. But Dak interrupted that flow by actually having his best performances this year. This is the best quarterback we've seen out of Dak Prescott, and that game might have been his best game ever. So what happens now? You have to go back in history, in short history, to look at what the Dallas Cowboys are going through in terms of identity crisis. I bring up their most important game, I think, under their tenure, which was that Rams game last year in the playoffs. And we know what happened in that game. Who was the best of the defense? Ezekiel and Dak. Dak was. They gave up 30 points to the Rams. Zeke went out there, 20 rushes, 47 yards. What did Zeke do last night? Let's see again. 20 rushes and 47 yards. Coincidence? Coinky-dink, as they say? No, I don't think so. What's happening in these critical moments is they're going through an identity crisis. They're thinking in main ingredient form, it's our defense, it's Ezekiel Elliott. But the reality is, Who shows up in their most critical moments? Dak. And I think right now we're starting to see that transition. Even they don't trust it, but it's a transition to the guy who shows up the most, Dak Prescott.
Listen, it has to be on the coaching. I don't think there's any way to justify going to Ezekiel Elliott on 3 consecutive plays in that current situation. Amari Cooper was having an amazing game. Dak was having an amazing game. So to put the game in his arm at that point in time, especially maybe on second, certainly on third down, would have been more sensible. I think it's hard to sit there and say, okay, well, we're justifying this based off of them playing offense by being the defense. Score. If you score and you allow that defense to show whether they can do it or not in that moment, I think it's more justified.
Well, justification to me, yeah, I can justify it. I thought obviously he had his reasons. Well, he's saying that, okay, I have the best running back in the NFL. I have the best offensive line in the NFL. We're talking 2, 3, all Hall of Fame, not Hall of Famers, all pros this year, maybe, maybe. I mean, a line that every team in the NFL would want.
Yeah.
Now, you know the guy who's going to get you, and you guaranteed this running back $50 million. You're saying, okay, you haven't paid Dak because they haven't believed in Dak. That's my thing. If he was good enough, he would have got that contract by now, according to whatever the front office is thinking, Jerry Jones included. And so I just think I can justify it by saying 3rd and 2. Yeah, you give the ball, put it behind your all-pro offensive line, put it around in the ball in the hands of the running back who's the best running back in the league, and go get 2 yards, just 2 yards. Now, looking back at it, he was hot at the time, but I can justify it. I wouldn't have done it. I would have said, Dak, go out there and get this for me because you've been playing really, really well. It's like the hot hand in a basketball game. I don't care who it is. If it's Steve Kerr, guess what, Michael Jordan? We're not going to have you pass the ball to Steve Kerr. Let him go make this ball because he's hot right now. I would have let the ball stay in Dak's hand. But I can justify why Jason Garrett did that.
Listen, I can see the identity crisis that Marcellus is talking about. But in that moment, after 59 minutes, 58 minutes, the identity should have been established. And I do believe that Jason Garrett is the guy in those moments that says, run the ball. The offensive coordinator has a lot of latitude, but when it comes to late game strategy, protecting the defense, how we going to close out this game, the head coach said, hey, run it here. And I think he did twice in a row, and it's a mistake, but I do understand. I'm just telling you, he doesn't trust his defense. I think he does trust Dak Prescott. And particularly, anybody sitting there watching that game last night, you had to have all the faith in the world in Dak.
Yeah.
There was no reason to doubt Dak in that moment based on what we had all seen for 58 minutes of football.
Well, there's an unconscious reason because you don't trust your eyes. Because you've been programmed by this organization. You've been programmed by the resumes of the defense of late and Ezekiel Elliott to not believe what you're seeing. And as we know what a coaching staff is, they're risk averse. Just like upstairs, they always justify things by the complexion of it. Why do they draft the biggest, fastest, strongest guy versus the guy who's just better? Because you can justify what you see. If you go into this situation, there is 1 minute and 33 seconds left in this game. You're thinking 2 things. Let's score, but more importantly, let's milk this clock. We've already given up 28 points to this team.
How can it be more importantly milk the clock? It's got to be you're losing.
Yeah, you're losing,
gotta be
but
most
you don't
important
want to
score.
save enough time for the other team to just run down the field, as this team has been looking good in terms of how they've attacked your defense. So you have to have a muscular move. That means whatever I'm doing, it has to justify more than one thing. It has to serve our purpose to get points up and serve another purpose. They can't put up points because we've milked the clock. I think that's what happened. So the decision was smart. The results make us question the decision. And as we know, all in the moment of truth, you can't question your decisions no matter what the results are.
I'm going to tell you why I don't think the decision was smart, though, is because Kirk Cousins has a reputation in big moments. And I would have bet on my defense and Kirk Cousins playing to his reputation.
Why not? You're losing. And I think it's interesting, the identity discussion here. And Tony G says, okay, you're not paying him because you're not convinced he's your guy. How does he convince you he's your guy if you're not giving him the opportunity to make plays in these type of moments?
It's called self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well,
we always always make up our problems to make sure that our problems are the reason we don't have the results.
Well,
that's how it goes. It's circular logic.
Then there's no need for a justification because Jason Garrett basically confirmed and did what everybody's thinking. We don't trust you in the big moments to make plays for us, whether we want to say it's the defense or not. We're not paying you this money, and we're not going to justify anything else other than say that if we're going to win and lose in these big moments, we're going to lean on Ezekiel Elliott, the engine of our team.
Let's not be hypocritical up here.
Hey,
LeVar Arrington,
okay.
There have been moments when you were not having a good game, but it's a big third down. And someone upstairs has whispered before even that moment, LeVar needs to be on the field. I don't give a damn if he's getting destroyed. LeVar needs to be on the field, right? So that's the same thing. Ezekiel Elliott in big moments, there is a mandate, there is a climate that whispers to you, he needs to get the ball. And that's just what's happening right here. There is a moment of transition when they finally say, you know what, LeVar, it's okay if he's on the sideline. It's okay because we have some young pups who could do it. But this is not the moment for the Dallas Cowboys
If
yet.
I was having the type of game Dak Prescott was having and I was on the sideline, that further goes to the point that those coaches should be in question. I mean, he was having a great game.
He was.
Y'all helped me realize, though,
but you were
something that I wish I had put into my essay, to be quite honest with you, because the lack of Dak contract is another signal of give it to Zeke. Again,
And you gave Zeke the contract.
You had on investment.
And you gave Zeke the contract. So
everything you do sends a message. And if you haven't signed this guy to a contract, that's it. We're in on him, but we're not all the way in on him. And we are all the way in on Zeke. We've paid Zeke to get these 2 yards. We paid this offensive line to help Zeke get these 2 yards. They followed the money, or Jason Garrett did, when he should have followed his eyes. He should have followed his eyes.
Minnesota's defense followed the money, too.
Well, they paid their defense as well. and look, this is unfair to Jason Garrett. One, he's not the one paying. Two, he's not the one calling the plays.
He called those. He told him to run.
Okay.
Now, where to run, that's Kellen Moore. But he told him to run in that moment.
What gives you that level?
Because that's what the job. That's what the head coach. That's why they call you head coach. There's about
to delegate.
No, there's about 5 decisions that are going to get made in a typical game, and that was one of the 5, and he blew it. All right, stick around. At the end of the show, find out our approval rating for Jason Garrett, and you won't believe Uncle Jimmy's take on the Cowboys coach. At the top of the hour, we'll have the most fearless discussion in sports. Are the Saints headed towards a Drew Brees, Teddy Bridgewater collision? But first, did Lamar Jackson's perfect day just vault him ahead of Russell